All right. So let's see. Homework for today was the dice roller thingy, right? Okay. So let's look at this. Just as a reminder, Thursday is, well, any class after 4 p.m. on Wednesday is when Thanksgiving break starts. So those classes will not meet. Um, and then we are back on Monday. So the next time I'll see you is Tuesday. And next week is the last week before final exams. So the university's policy, as far as I know, the most recent update is that you have your choice of whether to return to campus after Thanksgiving or do the last week of classes online. Um, our classes will be online next week. So Tuesday and Thursday next week, we will also be online. And then the final exams are also online. So the way I'm going to do final exams, and we'll talk about it in the detail of what to kind of focus on in the final next week, but is I'll probably put the exam up sometime Sunday night, the Sunday before finals week, and you just have to complete it before midnight on Friday of finals week. So that's kind of the punchline for. You do have to complete it in one sitting, but you can do it whenever it's convenient for you to do it during that week. All right. Any questions about that before I uh, keep going here with our dice roller? All right. So all right. So this is the current state of uh, my setup that we started working on, and then we need to have a some text down here below here for our quantity and then what we selected. All right, and remember these guys. So this is a vertical linear layout. There's a horizontal linear layout inside of here. So I need to give myself one more horizontal linear layout. I'm going to start off by putting it there at the top. And then I will throw two text views in there. And for right now, I'll change this guy to, this will be quantity TV. And I'll just give him a sample holder with like a 9 in there. And I'm going to bump the size quite a bit, make it 30. And I'll change the text color. Can I just do it there? Is that how it gets me? So I don't know, whatever color you want to make it. I'll do the same thing to this other text view. This guy will be called Dice TV. And actually, I think we can make these guys bigger. D6 in there right now. We'll change the color to, I don't know, make that guy yellow. And I'm going to change this guy's size to be 50 as well. All right. And then I want my quantity to be over here kind of towards the D6. So I'm going to set the gravity in here to right. All right. Now I'm going to take this linear layout. I'm going to bring it down here to the bottom of this group. Move it. All right, I'm going to show you a better way of handling this. If I could figure out how to get into it. It used to just be a tab down here. So we can view the code behind this guy. Where's the... Oh, here it is. The tab used to be down here. So I'm going to click on code. And it's going to show me all these guys that are in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the linear layout here that has my quantity and my dice TV. I'm going to highlight that guy. So if you've ever seen HTML before, notice this looks pretty similar. And this is an XML file, so it's a tag-based language that they're using to represent this. So I'm just going to cut that. And then I will scroll to the bottom of that list of linear layout stuff. And I will paste it in there. So now when I go back to design, it's now put it down to the bottom. So if you have problems, you know, kind of getting it to land where you want it to land over here, you can go to code or even look at split view and deal with both of them. But I usually just do code or design. Okay, so now we have our, you know, what we're rolling. So now let's get the last couple of pieces in here. So now we're going to have a roll button and a percentile button. And those really could go just below the let's think. They could be in the we could put it directly below the 90-20. That'll look okay. All right, so I'll do the same thing I just did before, where I'll put a horizontal layout. I'm going to put it up here at the top. Easy to drop it in there. Then I'm going to give myself a couple buttons in there. All right. One of these buttons is going to say roll on it. The other one will say percentile. Do I have have it set to wrap content? I do. So I could either shrink that guy down a little bit, or I can just change it to be like the percentile like that. Just do that. Move on with life. All right. So again, I have this top level linear layout. I'm going to go to code. Should be above these right now. All right, so here is this linear layout. I'll go ahead and cut that. And down here at the bottom, paste it back in there, go back to design. There's my buttons. Now we can mess with gravity more or something like that if we really wanted to get this to design better, but I think we have all the components in here now. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's hook these buttons up initially. So we want these buttons to control what goes inside of this text box or this text view. Okay, so whatever I dial in here will end up going in here. I am missing a 0, aren't I? And a clear button. So let me throw one more row in there. Go ahead and throw a 0 button in here and a clear button in here. We're going to call this guy 0_ button. A 0 in there. And then we'll have this button. We'll say clear on it. And we'll adjust the weight of this guy. So we're going to have this one be 0.33. And this guy will be 0.67. I thought that would lay it out better than that. Oh well, doesn't matter. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and move this down below the 1, 2, 3 line. So here's that linear layout. It's going to go right in here. All right, we'll say that that's reasonable enough. Just see the names of all these guys. That's the 7 button, that's the 0 button, so on and so forth. Okay, so what we want to start off with is let's get just this guy right here working. So this guy's called quantity TV. All right, and so I need to give myself programmatic access to this so that I can zero it out when I hit clear. So let's start with that piece. So I'm going to go ahead and create some private buttons, and I actually have changed some of these things. I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff for right now. We'll go one step at a time. Let's just do the clear button first. So we'll say private text view. Quantity TV. I'll give myself access to that. This dot quantity TV is equal to this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot quantity TV. And then I'm going to go ahead and give myself, I'm going to just gut that for right now. We're going to go ahead and give ourselves a button for clear. So public void on clear button pressed UV. And we'll go ahead and say this dot quantity TV dot set text to the empty string. All right, let's make sure that those two things are hooked up. So I need to, one of these, a couple of these guys has an on click set right now. All right, not him, not him, not him, not him, not him. Oh, I guess when I deleted it, it undid those. Okay, that's fine. So for clear, we'll go ahead and set his on click to on clear button pressed. So now when I run this, I should now be able to hit my clear button. And it clears that guy out. Okay, good. So now we want to have it when we hit any of these buttons, it updates this guy. So this is going to be called our, what I call it, Dice TV.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Is the 9 that you put into the quantity text view, is that a string or an integer right now?
It's a string.
Okay. Thank you.
So we'll say private text view Dice TV. So we'll give ourselves access to that Dice text view. So we'll say this dot Dice TV is equal to this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot Dice TV. So we have access to that guy. And then we're going to give ourselves a single method that allows us to decide which dice was clicked. Now, I think you'll be interested in the way I'm going to do this. So the plan is I don't need programmatic access to these buttons. Like last time I showed you an example of saying, well, if it was this button press, do this. If it was this button press, do this. What I can actually do is I can actually just grab the text off this button and use that to fill in this. I know that the guy that's going to call this function is going to be a button. So let me show you that. So I'm going to say public void on dice button pressed. Now I have to take a view v as a parameter here. But I happen to know that v will actually be a button. And then what I can do is I can say this dot dice TV dot set text. The text I'm going to set it to is the button dot get text. So whatever button called this guy, I'm going to grab the text from that button and I'll set the Dice TV's text to that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have all of these guys. Was I not able to select multiples? Oh, maybe not. So I'll go to my on click. I'm going to do on dice button pressed for this one as well. For this one as well. For this one. Okay. Now, all of these guys will call the same function, and that function will set this text to whatever's on this button. Oh, but they currently all say D4. I haven't updated the buttons yet. Okay, but in any case, you see at least it will change between D4 and D6 based on what I'm clicking there. So let's update these. So D4, D6. This will be a D8. This will be a D10. This will be a D12. And this will be a D20. Okay, so go ahead and run that again. Make sure it's behaving the way I want it to behave. D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20. All right. Now, realistically, I want this value to start off as nothing in there. But we'll get to that. We've just gotten the clear button to work. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to have this kind of calculator thing allow us to build up this number, this string that's currently on this button. Okay. So we can do something very similar here. Instead of having a separate button for all these, or instead of having direct access to all of these, I can use whatever text is on the button as a number and tack it onto this string. So when I press a 1, it'll put a 1 onto the string. When I press a 2, it'll put a 2 onto the end of that 1. So I'll keep tacking onto the end of this string. So let's go start with that. So we're going to say public void on calculator button. Actually, let's call it on numpad. Button pressed. This guy will take a view V. And again, I know that it was a button. So I can go ahead and typecast V to be a button, because I know that the type of view that called this guy was a button. And now that makes it convenient for me to work with him as a button. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the current string of text. So I'm going to say string current quantity is equal to this dot quantity TV dot get text. And then technically it comes out as something called a character sequence. I can then just say turn that into a string. You could also typecast it to a string. All right, so now I have the current quantity as a string. I want to take whatever button was passed in, I want to tack it onto the end of current quantity. So current quantity plus equals the button dot get text. And then this dot quantity TV set text to current quantity. So now I can come back out to my design and make sure all these buttons call the same on click. So this is going to be on numpad button pressed. On numpad button pressed. I really thought there was a way for me to highlight multiples. Oh, I think I could do it this way. I could do that. And say on numpad button pressed. Then I can do all three of those. On numpad button pressed. Then I can do the 0 button. And run this guy again. Go ahead and clear this out. We'll put in a 21 or 215, whatever it is. Clear it again. 35. Now, the one thing it will let us do right now, though, is it will let us start something off with a 0. I think that I can still convert 023 into a integer. I think integer.parseInt will still work for that. So let's call that OK. We can test that here real quick.
You are able to do that.
I am or not?
You are. That's what mine does.
Okay. So, I mean, you can certainly prohibit it from putting a 0 on the front. So you can say if it's the empty string, you don't allow it to have a 0. So here, let's assume that we really wanted to do that. What we can say is if the button dot get text dot equals a 0, and current quantity dot length is equal to 0. If both of those things are true, just return. Don't do anything else. So this is don't allow a 0 to start a number. So if I happen to be looking at a 0 and the current quantity length is also 0, I don't have anything in there, just end this function immediately. Otherwise, I can do whatever I want. So you'll see this guy now will have that behavior. So if I clear it, I try to start it with a 0, it doesn't do anything, but I can put a 1 0 in there and now it's fine. It just won't let me start it with a 0. Just by putting that if statement in there. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's make our percentile button work first, because this guy just gives us a random number between 1 and 100 and then puts it up here. So we need to make sure we have access to this dude up here and also this dude up here. Let's go and get their names. So this guy is called total TV and this guy is called output TV. So let's give ourselves access to those. So private text view total TV, private text view output TV, like that. And then we'll give ourselves access to those. This dot total TV is equal to this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot total TV. This dot output TV is equal to this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot output TV. Okay, so now I have access to those guys. So let's go ahead and give ourselves the percentile button. Now I'm also going to go ahead and give myself a random number generator. Actually, I don't need to do that because I could just do a D100. That's fine. So we'll go ahead and do a public void on percentile button pressed. And this guy is going to set output TV, set text to nothing, because we're only going to have a single roll for the percentile. And it'll set total TV, set text to the roll of a D100. So we're going to say dice D100 is equal to new dice with 100 sides. And then it'll say empty string concatenated with D100 dot roll. Now we could say this is a little inefficient in that every single time we hit this button, we create a brand new D100, but I might say maybe this is preferred over having a zillion dice sitting up here that we can do stuff with. But even having said that, it might make sense for us to just have the dice that we want to work with. No, I'm going to keep it self-contained inside these since this is the only place we use it. So I'll go ahead and give myself a D100, and then I'll set my output to nothing, and I'll set my total TV to whatever rolling that D100 gave me. And this is the on percentile button pressed. So I need to go connect that guy over here. So again, this is MVC in action, and hopefully by this assignment, had you do this over and over and over again, so you got accustomed to doing this. So on percentile button pressed. So now when I hit this guy, it should zero out this, and it should give me random rolls here. So there's a percentile. Okay, so that's rolling a D100 over and over and over again. All right, so now the last one is our roll button. And our roll button should roll this number of this die. And it should give us the individual rolls up here. And then it should sum them all up in here. So we're going to need to store our rolls somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the quantity. So we're going to call this guy on roll button pressed. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and get our current quantity. So we're going to say int quantity is equal to this dot quantity TV dot get text. And we're going to call integer dot parse int on that guy. Now it wants this to be a string, so I'll call toString on it. So this is going to get me whatever's in that quantity text box. It will give me a it is a string, and then I'll parse it into an int. I'm going to store that into my int quantity. Now, right now, we're not doing any sort of error checking here because, I mean, technically, if we run this and I currently have nothing in there and I hit roll, we could decide how we want to handle that. Maybe we say we're going to, if we don't have anything in there, we roll a single D6. So we can do something like, I think I've shown you, so I'll do this first, and then I'll say if this dot quantity TV dot get text dot toString dot length is greater than 0. That means if there's something in there, then I'll update quantity to be equal to the integer parsed out of that. So I'll assume it's 1. So I'll assume there's nothing in the text view. And then I'll say, if there actually is something in the text view, go ahead and overwrite quantity with the integer version of whatever's in that text view. All right, then we're going to have our type of dice. So we're going to get the type of dice. So we're going to say string type of dice is equal to this dot dice TV get text toString. So I'm going to have a string that is going to be the type of dice. Now, the number of sides of that, see, all of our strings here have a D at the beginning of it followed by the number. So really, I want everything from bucket 1 on. So I could write a function that just builds up a new string that starts at bucket 1 and builds up everything. So this would build up a 4, this would build up a 6, an 8, a 1, 0, a 1, 2, a 2, 0. So I can build up those numbers, but I can also use the built-in substring class that is in the Java documentation for strings. So I can actually say int number of sides is equal to type of dice dot substring and say I want everything from bucket 1 to the end. And then what do I want to do with that guy? I want to say integer dot parse int on that number. Then I'll say dice D is equal to new dice number of sides. So this is the dice that I'm going to roll. This is the number of times I'm going to roll it. All right, so just so you can follow what's going on here. If this was a D6 and I say, get me everything, get me the substring of that guy from bucket 1 on, that's going to get me the 6 as a string because this is bucket 0, this is bucket 1. So I say, give me bucket 1 all the way to the end. If this was a D20, it'll bucket 1 and bucket 2. It'll get me that. So I'm just bypassing the D on the string. So I get the type of dice, then I get the substring of that and parse it. That gives me my number of sides. Now, since I need to hold my individual rolls, I'm going to go ahead and create an array big enough to hold that number of, so quantity number of rolls. So I'm going to create an int array called the rolls. This is going to be a new int array of size quantity. And then I'm going to go ahead and roll the dice that many times. For int I is equal to 0, I is less than the rolls.length, I plus plus. Each time through, what am I going to do? I'm going to roll my dice D. The rolls at bucket I is equal to D.roll. So I'm going to roll this dice that was built with the correct number of sides 1 time and store it in the array at this bucket. Now, what I can go ahead and do is I can build my sum as I go along. So So I can start sum off at 0, and then I can say sum plus equals the rolls at bucket I. This will be my total. So I'll store the roll, and then I'll go ahead and build up my my sum. Now, if I want, I can also go ahead and build up my string at the same time for my output. So I can say string output string. I'll start it off as the empty string, and what we're going to do is we'll just put in our roll plus spaces. So we'll say output string plus equals. So it started off as the empty string. So we'll go ahead and add the rolls at bucket I concatenated with a space. I think, is that how I represented it before? Did I have commas there? Oh, I had plus signs after it. Okie dokie. I'll ask the question here. If output string dot length is equal to 0, if this is the first time I'm adding something to it, I'll just say output string is equal to, well, I can just say plus equals the rolls at bucket I. Else, there must already be something in my output string. So tack on a plus sign each time. So otherwise I'll say output string plus equals, and then I'll say the string plus followed by a space concatenated with the rolls at bucket I. So it's just for formatting. Otherwise, if I always put on a plus something, that I'll end up with like a +2, +5, +7. So I'll have this weird extra plus sign at the beginning. Where in this case, if this is the beginning, just store the number. Otherwise, store a plus sign followed by a space followed by the number. Okay, but I already have my my sum here as we're going along, and I'm storing the individual rolls in case we need to use them for later. We're putting them into this array. So now when this for loop is done, I should be able to say this dot output TV dot set text to output string. And I should be able to say this dot total TV dot set text equal to the empty string concatenated with sum. All right, so when the roll button is pressed, we assume a quantity of 1, update it if quantity has something in there. Then we get the string associated with our dice, the number of sides from that, generate a dice object that we can roll. How many are we going to roll? We're going to roll quantity number of them. So we're going to go ahead and create an array to hold those individual rolls. I'm also going to create a variable called sum that's going to hold up the sum of all our rolls. And then I'm going to create a variable called output string that we're going to use to build up the thing we should actually put into our output text view. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to roll the dice the correct number of times. I could say the rolls.length. I could say quantity here. These are synonyms because the rolls was built with quantity. Each time through, I'll roll the dice once, store it in the rolls at bucket I. Then I'll add the rolls at bucket I to my ongoing sum. Then I'll concatenate onto my string appropriately. I'll do all that over and over again. As soon as that for loop is done, I'll set my output text view to whatever the output string is, and I'll set my sum, my total text view equal to whatever the sum was. Okay, and this guy is called on roll button press, so we need to make sure we hook that up over here. We'll click on our roll button. Here's his on click. Here's his on roll button press. We'll go ahead and run that guy. So if I want to go ahead and roll 5 D10s, I'll get my 5 individual rolls. And that's the sum of it. If I want to roll it again, it'll roll it again. I probably will get different values. If I want to roll a D12 and I want to roll 50 of them, there's my 50 rolls, and there's my sum of those 50 rolls, so on and so forth. If I want to roll a percentile, there's some percentiles. If I want to clear this and then I want to roll a single D12, I don't have to put a 1 in. I can just say a single D12. And it assumes a 1 if I didn't put anything before it. All right, so now the last thing we might do is, just to get things kind of set up initially, we might make the original text here a D4, maybe because it's the first thing you can click, D4 or whatever. So we might make it default to D4. We might make this guy default to nothing, and we might make these also default to nothing. Now, one thing I like to do is I want to kind of remember what my user interface is for. So I'll change this guy to a D4. I could do that here. That's not going to hurt anything. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and leave the 9 here, leave the 85 here, and leave this string here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to programmatically zero them out inside of onCreate, rather than zeroing them out here. Because if I zero it out here, I might forget that I even have a text view up here. I might forget I even have a text view here, so on and so forth. So by having placeholders in here, it kind of reminds me what that guy's for, and then I can fix this at runtime. So inside of onCreate, I can go ahead and say clear the interface, and I can say this dot output TV dot set text to the empty string, this dot total TV dot set text to the empty string, and this dot quantity TV dot set text to the empty string. And now when I run this, I have an initial interface that's empty. And if I just hit roll right now, it'll roll a single D4. Otherwise, I can say roll 5 D4, or change the D4 to a D10, roll 5 D10, roll 52 D10. Clear this, I could roll 13 D20s, so on and so forth. All right, so I think that gives us a full working thing. All right, so questions about this? All right, so now let's go ahead and, just so we don't start something new before next week, since we don't have class on Thursday, let's just go ahead and throw some pictures in here. Make this look a little flashier. So I'm going to bring some pictures in. We have to go get our pictures first. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to say D20 dice. This should give us some dice to choose from. I'll just show you kind of how I originally, let's call it D20 dice set. This will probably work fine. So I'll go ahead and I'd rather there not be shadows if that's possible. Oh, these are getting harder to read. Was this one set up fine? usually are just in a very specific format. Show me one of those. And I need to be able to read it. Can't believe that I'm not finding the picture as I would expect it. Usually you have things like this, but they show it kind of in the package. Dice set package. It's a 20, a 12, a 4, a 10. These are the percentiles. That's fine. I can make this one work. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and you do not want to steal images off the internet, but for educational purposes, we're going to do this. So I'll just show you kind of a simple way that I like to cut things out. So you can save the image. I'm actually just going to copy it in on a Mac. I'm going to open a program called Preview. And I'll say new from the clipboard. And you can do this with Photoshop or whatever. But we want to cut out these individual things. But what I'm going to start off by doing is I want to get rid of this white background. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a, let's see, I need to save this as a PNG. We'll just call that dice PNG because that will let me do things to it. Not. All right, so I have this little thing up here. It's like the instant alpha where I want to get rid of all this white background. So you can just start dragging it until it starts seeping into the dice itself. And I don't want it to impact the dice itself. I'll probably just stop like right around there. Press delete so I get some of that away, and then I'll do a little bit more. I'll do a little bit more. So, you know, you can sit there and screw with it for a while until it looks close to perfect. I'm just kind of screwing around with it quickly. So then I'll go ahead and use my selection tool, and I'm going to pick one of the dice. So kind of get the picture roughly the way you want it. And I'll copy that guy. And then I'll save it as D20. So it'll be a D20 PNG. I'll do the same thing with my D12. And this will be my D12.png. And here's my D8. Arguably, I could clean that one up a little bit, but we'll just call it good enough. Save that as my D8. D4. D6. And then this guy is technically the D10. And this guy, along with this guy, is the percentiles. But we'll just leave the button for percentiles alone. All right, so now I have a bunch of pictures. So I'm going to go back into Android Studio. And let's make sure this works the same way as it used to work. So I'm going to go into Resources. I'm going to go into Drawable. And let's see, can I import into Drawable here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say Reveal in Finder. That'll show it to me in the Finder. So I have my Drawables folder. And I'm actually just going to drag my images into this folder one at a time. Those are fun noises on the new Mac OS. All right, so those are my different dice. So now they've shown up in here. It's asking if I want to add these to the GitHub. I'll just say always add. So whenever I add other files, definitely put them on GitHub. All right, so I'm going to go back to my interface now. And I want to change what's on these buttons. So I think a button has an image attribute. Or we can actually, here's an image button. Can I upgrade my guys to image buttons? Let me pull that off. I think I could do it this way. So I can either delete all these and make them image buttons, or I can go into the code part of this where it says D4, D6, all those guys. I think it's the second half of it. There's D6, there's D4. So I'm going to make these guys, I think I can just update it in here to be called an image button. Let's just make sure that first one updated before I go and mess with the other ones. So is this guy now an image button? Let's say possibly. Can I change his image so I can go to his source? And I can choose the D4 as the source image. Okay, and that looks obviously perfect. So let's go and do it for all the other ones. So we're going to make all of these guys image buttons. It takes forever for that to update. So this is kind of showing you that back and forth cadence you can have between, you know, the design view and the code view, and how sometimes you can get something done more quickly on the code view side of things. Rather than deleting all those buttons and then recreating them. Okay, so I should be able to go back into design. So this is our D6. This is our D8. This is our D12. This is our D. Actually, the other one was the D10. then finally our D20. All right, so obviously that looks perfect. We don't need to adjust that at all. I think there's probably a thing that allows it to scale. So let me, so here's our scale type. Let's just say fit center. Ah, look at that. Almost looks like we know what we're doing. Fit center. And then the last two. Fit center. Okay, so now we actually have real dice we can click for D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20. So there's my D4. Ruh-roh. Do those buttons not have on clicks? Or did I break the on click when I...
Would it be a problem that inside of main you declared them as regular buttons and
Oh, probably, yes. Thank you. So because of the way I'm handling this in here, these guys on the dice button pressed, these guys are actually image buttons. Ooh, but do image buttons have a text? We might have just ruined our world. Does this guy still get text? I'm going to call this guy the D8 button. This is D10 button. Because before I was grabbing the text that was on the thing, I no longer have that. Now I have images. This is D12. But we have the technology to fix this. And this is D20. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the button's ID, which looks like D6, D6 button, D4 button, D8 button, so on and so forth. I'm going to get the substring of this guy from, well, I'm going to get the position of the underscore using index of. Then I'm going to use the substring from 1 until index of. And that should give me the number of sides. Just to make sure this is doing what I want it to do, I'm just going to test something here real quick. We're going to say this dot total TV set text, and we're going to say this guy is the button dot get ID. Oh, but that gets it as an int. Let's see what it looks like if I say toString for the button. Okay, that is not what I want. Because what I really want to get is I want to get this button's name, this guy here, D6 button. Let's see what he gives me that will let me pull that off. problem is that the real ID is a number, and that number is somewhere inside of the R class. So R dot ID dot, and then this guy is going to be some number. So I can't do it off of its name. Really? That seems unlikely to me. Android get views ID name. So does that mean I have to tag it? Let's peek. So if I have this guy, rather than using his ID, interesting. Okay. So this is kind of works like a lot of the game things. I assume this is how it's going to work. So I'm going to put for his tag, I'll put, well, I'll go ahead and put D4 for its tag. I'll do D6 for this guy. Wait, he still has text though. D8. D10. D12. D20. The button dot get. So get tag dot toString should give me what I'm looking for now. That's interesting that it shows me it having a text attribute, but it really doesn't actually have one. So there's my D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20. So I'm actually using an attribute of the view called tag that allows me to kind of hide some string into it. So now I can get my correct number of dice. That way. There's my D4, D6, D8, D10, D12. And I can say I want 23 D20s, roll those. There's that. Change that to percentiles, clear. Okay. So I think we have a pretty good dice roller at this point. So what we're looking at here is pretty close to the in fact, this might look a little better, to be honest, which isn't saying really anything, but pretty close to the dice roller that I originally wrote for the iPhone App Store that made a bunch of money. So the idea is that if you can come up with your own little utility, something that, you know, for something you do in real life, maybe it's you know, some exercise program for keeping track of reps and things like that, or, you know, whatever it is, build some utility that means something to you. The app stores are out there. The Google App Store, I think, costs $30 a year. The Apple App Store costs $100 a year, and you can put as many apps up as you want. Apple takes 20%. I think they're changing that to now take 15% instead of 20% of the revenue. But they handle all the credit cards and stuff, and all you have to do is have a bank account to tell them to put the money. So from a computer programming perspective, I like to tell people it's kind of like a stock market that always goes up. You know, you write an app. So let's say you set a goal for yourself to write one app a month. You know, and that might be, you know, depending on what the app is, so that might not be reasonable. But if you, let's say you're going to set a goal to write one utility app per month, and even if that app is completely useless, you're probably going to sell some copies of it, is kind of the idea. So let's say each of your apps, you sell 10 copies. Let's say it's a $1 app. So that means the first month you'll make $8 because you'll make 80% of the thing, so on and so forth. So by the end, if you're selling 10 a month of each one, you start making real money from these little widget apps that really don't do much, but it solves some problem people have. Now, if you have some skills in making them look better, now obviously, you know, you probably want them to look probably better than this today. Apple would reject this today. I think they would say the user interface is too junky. Google would probably let it on, but Google has kind of lower standards. But in any case, hopefully this gives you a little bit of motivation where even with the skills that you currently have in programming, you can build something that does something real. Okay, so what we're going to add, what we're going to look at next class is how do I go between multiple screens of, so if I kind of throw this into the slides. Let's see, where am I at for this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say launching a new activity. And then sending data to other activities. And this is a new design pattern called Singleton that we're going to look at there. And then finally, array adapters for showing scrollable lists of stuff. Okay, so questions about kind of the next couple of things we're going to be doing. So that should give you kind of enough to be dangerous with writing mobile applications. So again, this isn't so much about writing Android apps as it is about introducing some design patterns that are going to be part of computer science moving forward, but then also giving you kind of hopefully something interesting to look at from the perspective of, oh, I can take my Java and now I can build real user interfaces out of this. Next semester, you'll be in the, a lot of you will be in the 300 class where we use C++ and go in and focus on things called data structures. But you'll also be in the 370 software engineering class, which will use Visual Studio.net to build user interfaces kind of like this, you know, where you'll drag buttons on and then you'll have to use MVC to make your code talk to the buttons, talk to the labels, things like that. All right, so this should give you kind of a crash course for what graphic user interface development is kind of like. And then when you sit down at a new tool, you just have to say, how does MVC work? All right, I'll push this up to GitHub, no homework for over break, and I'll see everybody on Tuesday. It might be 30%, James. So maybe they just reduced it to 20%. They just did a reduction, some kind of reduction for what they take.
Yeah, I just know with the whole have you heard about the 4-day lawsuit?
I know kind of it. I don't know any details about it. Where Apple took it off the App Store because they were wanted to be able to take revenue from it, where they were driving people back to their site.
Yeah, I think from that lawsuit, they were arguing that like Apple was taking 30% and they actually wanted lowered or during that lawsuit or what have you. So I think that's where I heard the 30% from. And I think that's both on Google Play and Apple, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, they could have used it.
See, that's what I don't get. So the company is complaining that Apple's taking too much money. It sounds like it was the thing, right? That's why they want to do the stuff offline, is that, oh, well, Apple takes too much of our revenue.
Yeah.
Well, but isn't that Apple? I mean, this happened historically with the Wall Street Journal. Apple's policy was for the App Store that that if you were going to have your app on the App Store and you offered a service, like for instance, a Wall Street Journal subscription, you had to offer at least as good of a deal in the app as you did externally. So the Wall Street Journal, even though they can sell subscriptions to the Wall Street Journal through their website, they couldn't offer a better deal on their website than they did on iPad. So then imagine how many people subscribe to Wall Street Journal and what percentage of them view it on iPad. All of a sudden you have Apple getting a pretty good chunk of revenue for the Wall Street Journal newspaper by just giving them the platform. But the punchline there is that having that platform made the Wall Street Journal more available. So, I mean, you know, I'm not necessarily, basically Apple has the platform. They're allowed to get as rich as they want off of it. If it wasn't a good platform, then why have your name on it?
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, well, through this lawsuit, it sounds like Epic Games made the first advance on disobeying Apple's terms of service. So my best guess is what's going to happen. Like, I think they're still going on with the lawsuit, but I think Epic Games is going to lose the lawsuit for doing that. But
yeah. I don't know if that's going to work. Because I mean, you know, a place like Epic Games, they might be a big fish compared to a lot of companies, but not compared to Apple.
Oh no, absolutely not.
So it's not like they can go throw Apple around in the courts.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, what's going to happen is Apple's going to get their cut of that game if they want to have that game on iPhone.
Right. Yeah, and then I think they're also filing a lawsuit on Google Play for some. I think it was for some antitrust laws or what have you, something ridiculous. Because I think Google Play decided to take Fortnite off of